Welcome to today's Mindset webinar on UX design. Just a couple things before we do go ahead. Everybody is muted on entry, so if you have any questions during the session, you'll want to use the Q&A option in the navigation bar at the bottom of your screen. Andy will be taking questions towards the end of the presentation, so just put them in there. If you have any housekeeping issues otherwise, feel free to use the chat box. And actually we're just going to go ahead and get started. We are very excited to have you join us today for our Mindsets webinar on cloud platform integration. Today's presenter is Mindset Solution Owner and SAP Cloud Platform Expert, Andy Prier. Andy is a tech enthusiast and a UX champion. He's an active blogger and speaker about SAP, UX, cloud, and various innovations. Having over 12 years of experience in leading and designing solutions for several technology spaces, Andy is always looking for impactful ways to improve process. While also looking to push designs one step further outside the box. He's spoken on SAP at numerous events, including TechEd, Sapphire, ASUGS, and written for SAP Insider. He's put together a fantastic presentation for you to share with you today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Andy.
Thank you, Amy. Welcome everybody today to today's webinar about SAP Cloud Platform Integration. I'm Andy Prier, the Director of Cloud Solutions at Mindset, and I'm glad everyone's here today to attend. So to start off with today, I would like to jump right into the different cloud service models so that we might understand where does cloud platform fit within that service model. There are several that exist, but we're going to talk about 3 of them today. So if you see my graphic that I have there in blue, there is infrastructure, platform, and software. At the bottom most, infrastructure is your basic components you would think of at a data center: servers, networking, databases, and storage. All of the pieces necessary to even have any sort of software running. Next, in the middle layer there, that's the platform, which is what we'll be talking about with Cloud Platform today. There you have tools, hosting, application runtimes, and more specifically, for our purposes today, is middleware. On top of that is software as a service. So these are the types of applications you would find like Salesforce, SuccessFactors, Dropbox, Slack. These are some fairly well-known applications, both in the consumer space and within SAP. So there's usually a lot of confusion about when I'm talking about SaaS or IaaS. It's all as a service, and today we're talking about platform. So we might build software on a platform so that our software as a service is to our consumers. So what are the different platforms that you would find within SAP? There are mainly 3. The one that we're mostly going to talk about today is the Neo environment. The Neo environment is an environment that supports Java, HANA, and HTML5. Those are the applications that you'll mostly see hosted there. And some of the supporting services that you'll find there is Web IDE, Portal, obviously Cloud Platform Integration, and API management. This is a layer that is SAP's proprietary environment. It is put together specifically by SAP in their data centers. There's also Cloud Foundry. Cloud Foundry is a container-based architecture, and it runs basically any program language for the app runtimes that are hosted there. Cloud Foundry is an industry standard that is a platform as a service technology, and SAP is a founding platinum member of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. So these types of Cloud Foundry environments, they can be on any sort of cloud environment. So it's multi-cloud. It could be on AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform. It could be another another proprietary cloud platform that we're not talking about here, but essentially this is an architecture for cloud platform. The Cloud Foundry environment, one thing I'll note here is that it's mostly meant to be specific to very custom types of 12-factor type applications or microservice applications or Internet of Things. These are the types of applications you usually find within Cloud Foundry. So they're as an extension to SAP. For our SAP folks on the call today, they're an extension of SAP. These might be services that don't exist. Maybe you have a database or a service that you want to host out on Cloud Foundry, and it's an API that is very specific to something you do. Then you can put it within Cloud Foundry, and then your applications can consume those microservices based off of that. One other notable for SAP is the HANA XS Advanced applications. This is also the environment you'll work in. So these are specific to multi-targeted applications that you will run in that environment. Just to note about some of the services that are available on Cloud Platform, Big Data, MongoDB, PostgreSQL, Redis, and RabbitMQ are all being taken off as services. SAP is not trying to compete there with those services anymore. So as of the January 15th of this next year, those won't be available for us to use anymore. All right, there is a final cloud platform that doesn't get talked about as much, but because it's fairly new. This is the ABAP environment. And so this is a place where we can write ABAP cloud apps. These are mostly to host in the cloud. It is also a target of S4 HANA cloud applications. So if you want to write things that you don't want to disturb your digital core and you want to have an ABAP application in the cloud, this is the place to do it. It's new. It's still, features are being added, and it's nice because you're able to take advantage of the newest features without any sort of disruption to your existing investments there. As of right now, I only have seen one data center in Germany, so it's not as prolific as some of the other cloud environments that we see and in what regions they exist in. But I think this is something we'll see more of in the future. Okay. The next thing we need to talk about to get an understanding and a foundation of cloud platform is the connectivity. How do we get information from our on-premise systems into cloud platform and vice versa? And how do we harmonize the security model with that? So while these are both interesting problems, to sum it up, our solution to that is the SAP Cloud Connector. This is a piece of software that you run within your data center. It needs to be at least within the DMZ in order for this to work, but I have seen it behind the firewall. I've seen it in the DMZ. I've seen them in multiple places and also multiple instances of it. Usually with the development instances, you'll find it behind the firewall just because it's not something that's productive or available to the outside world, and it's only being accessed by developers or testers. All traffic is ran through this cloud connector, and it's done through a secure tunnel over HTTPS. There's fairly good documentation about the cloud connector and what kind of security that it employs, so I won't go into detail there. But this is the main way to access that. On top of that, we have the capability of having single sign-on through our corporate identity provider. So for instance, if you have ADFS or you have Azure Active Directory as your primary identity provider, using a SAML2 connection between both cloud platform and your identity provider and it being the same identity provider that you use at your data center, you're able to create that single sign-on experience from cloud platform and the applications that you access there, whether it be a mobile phone or a desktop type of application. All of those can still go through that corporate identity provider. Organization of the cloud platform. So the way the accounts work is you have a global account, and this is the organization level. So if I have, Acme LLC, and that is my organization, that will be the top level account. And then underneath that, I have sub accounts. So I have one global account to N sub accounts. The way I usually suggest to set these up is have a dev, QA, and prod environments. So it matches up with your SAP system. Keeps things simple to connect the two systems together, and it also makes your change process similar. Within the sub account, you need to have a connection to your cloud connector. You have individual services. Your single sign-on is only for that sub account. You need to have users and roles set up within that account. Web IDE, cloud, a lot of the other cloud services go through these sub accounts. Under those sub accounts, there are different roles that are specific to the platform. There's the administrator, the cloud connector admin, the developer, the application admin, and the support user. These are not roles that you can get rid of. You need to assign at least an administrator and at least a cloud connection admin and at least a developer. The application admin and support user, you don't have to use. I recommend using those for your subject matter experts or your testers. Developer, the role is self-explanatory. Your developers would use that role. Cloud connection admin, usually this is a basis person or someone who's put in charge of administering the cloud connector. And then finally, the administrator is the administrator of that sub account. So this tends to be, depending on the company that's using it, it could be a basis person, it could be a combination of basis and development teams. Usually in the development account, I see the desire to keep it fairly easy for both those roles to be assigned to the administrator account. But once we move into QA and prod, then you have less and less access there. So integration components. The components that we're going to talk about today for the integration services that are available for cloud platform. And I use this diagram from SAP because I think it's very representational of what I consider to be integration. There are different types of integration. There are different methodologies for integration, and I think this captures that fairly well. The integration styles that you see at the top there are process, business to business, data, user experience, and IoT. Today, we're not going to talk about user experience, and we're not going to talk about IoT. The reason is those technologies are fairly separate from what we're going to talk about with CPI. However, the integration styles to the left, process, business to business, and data, I feel those directly contribute to user experience. So keep that in mind as we move forward here. Underneath that, we have the SAP API Business Hub. Here, we're able to look at APIs available for cloud platform integration and then prepackaged content. So that's an accelerator, especially to SAP products in the cloud and other cloud options that you can publish on the API Business Hub that gives developers a leg up whenever they start integrating. So this is one of the features that you're going to get that is above and beyond what you would get with, say, Tibco or Dell Boomi or something like that. The API Business Hub allows you to import that prepackaged content into CPI. It also gives you documentation that you're able to look at there. So there is that feature that could be used across products. Okay, so the next part I wanted to talk about here is really the integration styles, those three that I mentioned, the process integration, the B2B, and data integration. Process integration is typically more of your transactional or I would say real-time or near real-time types of interactions. This is focusing on process harmonization. For instance, I talked to a customer recently where they had a mobile application that was updating a database, and they wanted to do all kinds of extractions from the database, but there was some concern about what is the licensing implications for that, what it can do to performance when it's pulling all of this data out. My suggestion was, well, why don't you just put an integration in between, and then you're able to pick and choose the information that the mobile applications send, and then you're able to put that into your reporting database, and everything else remains relatively unchanged. And so that's process harmonization, right? You're able to do that. The most things that you will find within these process-oriented integrations is you're adapting your protocols. So one piece of software might be communicating only with a database, and then another type of software only use REST APIs, and then SAP is expecting IDOCs. This type of integration is pulling all those different protocols into one spot and harmonizing that. The other piece with this is you need to have delivery persistence. This delivery persistence means that once I get a request, it's guaranteed to send. I know that it's going to happen, and if it doesn't happen, I'm going to alert those who are monitoring these integrations that something has happened and give them the capability to retry sending it over and over. We're not relying on someone on a mobile application to push the button over and over again until we get the integration fixed. The middleware will take care of that for us. We have rule-based routing, which could be something with EDI where we have multiple trading partners that we're trying to send everything through. So we split those messages up based off of company 1, 2, 3. They only get their messages. So those rules are in place to route to the right receiver. The different scenarios that you'll see for this is A to A, B2B, and B2C, which is application to application, business to business, and business to customer. Next one, B2b integration. This is EDI is a good example, or IDOC. Edifact, anything that has some sort of predetermined format that we're communicating back and forth with, that's a business-to-business interaction. There are many others besides just IDOC or EDI, but these are prime examples where you would see business-to-business integration. The next one is data integration. This is slightly different than what you would see for the process-oriented. So data integration is, I need data extracted from this database, and then I need to push it into my cloud solution. That's moving data from one place to another. So there's a specific type of technology that we need to focus on that. Data integration tends to be very volume heavy. There's a lot of information you're pulling out of that and that you're trying to push into something else, or there may be big conversions that's happening there. So we don't necessarily want to rely on a real-time type of tool to do that. We need something that is less than real-time or near real-time. Now, the tools that are available in SAP's integration portfolio, I'd be remiss if I weren't to talk about the existing tools that exist today. One of them is SAP Process Orchestration, or process integration, PI, PO. Before that, it was called XI. It's an on-premise middleware. It's very process oriented. I have seen it used in other ways that are less than process oriented, but it is there. It's a very flexible tool, and it's foundational to CPI. There are two types of CPI. There's CPI PI, which is for process integration, and there's DS, which is for our our data synchronization, our data services. DS is based off of Business Objects Data Integrator or Data Services, depending on which version you're familiar with. This is an ETL tool. It does the data conversions. It's very data oriented. It's a very flexible tool as well, but they're both meant for different things. Usually you see these business objects data services systems that are really large with memory because they're pulling a lot of things from the database into memory and doing transformations there, and then they're taking all of that and pushing it all at once. So both of them do transformations, but one of them is meant specifically for, preparing databases for reporting or preparing data to move from one environment to another, and based on volume, this is the one you pick. The next part I want to talk about here are the different services that you'll find for cloud platform. So the very first one there is one I'm going to talk about today, and maybe touch on a few of the others there. So there's cloud integration. This is where you're able to do that process type of integration. API management. This is an area where you'll have APIs that are exposed to the world, and you want to control access to them. You want to control how much data goes through it, or you maybe want to keep track of volume there. You want to turn it off if it's being abused. That's really what API management is for. Workflows and business rules. So this is a cloud workflow area. It automates business processes based off of decisions. Some of these decisions could have user input in there, but basically it's a stateful way of making decisions within a workflow. A lot of you have seen this within SAP. They have their own workflow engine here. This is just a similar version to that, but in the cloud. Enterprise messaging. This is kind of an event type of messaging that you would see. They a lot of the times will trigger functions based off of, could be from IoT that triggers this messaging. It's usually used at a subscription level, and it's highly integrated architectures that use this. Integration Advisor I will talk about a little bit at the end, but this is to help accelerate the implementation of some B2b scenarios. IoT integration, integration with Internet of Things. Basically, if you have smart devices or sensors or things like that that you would have on a plant floor, and you want to integrate that with some reporting or a mobile device, this is the type of tool that you would use that for. API Business Hub. This is a place I mentioned earlier where you can find prepackaged content, adapters, APIs. And then finally, open connectors to accelerate the connectivity to third-party applications. So again, if you were to see this on cloud platform, this is more of the format that you would see it in, just so that you can see it there. But to call out some of the things for cloud platform integration, it has a lot of prepackaged integration content. It has an adapter SDK, so perhaps you need to create an adapter for your own product, and you want to get it on the API Business Hub. There's tools to do that. There's a way for you to circulate that to the world. So this is the area that you would be able to start seeing those things. I think a lot of times there's some questions about why CPI over perhaps another product we have, or maybe on our the things that we have on premise already, such as PI. I think that these are the main things that I would call out: the pre-configured integration flows, the pre-configured mappings, the pre-configured value mappings. And I really like the Swagger APIs that are available all within one cloud platform. You know, with your on-premise systems, you're not likely to have Swagger APIs to help you understand that. A lot of it is experimentation and reading documentation. If that's all in one place here, then that's extremely useful. And then the integration with SAP's cloud software, you know, Hybris, Ariba, SuccessFactors, all of that is documented here. So that really gives us some power there. Integration capabilities. The capabilities within Cloud Platform that I want to talk about is mostly what is the things that you can do with it. So I talked about message routing. This is gathering, splitting, joining of messages based off of the content. Casting it out to multiple receivers. It could be at the same time. It could be at different times, or we have to wait until something happens. That message routing happens based off of logic that we come up with. Message transformations. These are built-in functions that are available within the tool itself. There are more granular ways of using these transformations, particularly now is Groovy Scripting. So this is kind of a user-defined function where if I want to use code to accomplish something I can't accomplish with the given functions, then this type of scripting allows me to do that. Calling external systems. So many times you might have a message transformation that requires you to reach out to a microservice and pull in that information. This is one of the things you can do within transformations is I give you some data, you give me something back, and then I can transform my message with that process. Content modification. This could be something from the effect of I get something over HTTP. I want to change something in the header to make it look like it's coming from somewhere else, or it's I'm adding attachments to it. That's what content modification is. Format conversion. This is basically file formats, right? This could be XML, JavaScript object notation, CSV, EDI, and then back to XML. So this all behind the scenes works off of a verbose XML. It's similar to JSON, but it's a lot more human readable, and it's very specific on where things start and end. So most of that is based off of XML. We can do compression, whether it be we're just compressing it to save space, so base 64 to compress a string into a smaller amount, or zipping up the content if maybe it's a binary thing. We can zip it up to save space and save the things that we're sending across the wire. XPath, so we're able to navigate and find things within the messages as a way to do that as well. And then a multitude of adapters. I'm not going to go over every one of them here, but some of them to call out that are pretty important here is JDBC, IDOC, the AS adapters, and then the very targeted adapters like SuccessFactors or Facebook. Those adapters allow you just to configure the things that you're trying to do, as opposed to write every single interaction. These adapters give you that capability. So the nice part that I find is these are just out of the box adapters that you get. There's also a community of adapters. So these are third-party adapters that integrate with many of the services that we're familiar with as a consumer. You know, I'm sure if you look at the screen, there's a lot of familiar logos that you see there. But perhaps there's a method to where you want to integrate with Slack based off of something that happens within one of your integration flows. You may want to trigger a message on Slack where a group of people are monitoring if an event happens. Maybe you want to integrate with DocuSign where you want to be alerted the moment something is signed. It alerts people into Slack. Or a Fiori application where you're keeping contracts within DocuSign. All of these are interesting types of integration scenarios. This is all accomplished with the open connectors. The nice part about the open connectors and what the value proposition is each connector or each software is going to have its own way that it authenticates, the way that it allows you to poll or what events happen or what kind of errors happen. And these connectors allow you to normalize that into an integration. So it's one harmonized API. You don't have to think about here, okay, every time I send a communication, I need to include my OAuth token or you don't have to think about that stuff. It's all configured. And so this allows us to integrate with all these different ERP systems or cloud solutions, such as ECC or SuccessFactors or Fieldglass. Okay, so some of you might be interested in seeing the tools. I have some screenshots today. Most of it is more explaining what you've seen before. So within CPI, the integration flows are called iFlows. They don't look exactly like this, but I wanted it to be large enough and clear enough for everyone to see. So I'm sorry, it's not an exact screenshot of if you were expecting that. We always have a sender and a receiver within an integration, and the sender could be I'll use my mobile device as an example here. Maybe our mobile device is sending something, and we want to inform several receivers based off of something that happened on that mobile device. Maybe it's a service call, and we need to alert a manager, and we need to alert a supervisor, technician, or something like that. There's multiple people we need to alert because of that notification. So the first box that you see here is the sender. That's the API that has received something, and then it's pushing it forward to be converted into something useful by the receivers here. So for instance, we might have a mapping step that's here where we receive something and we see, yeah, there's a message here. It's got a picture. It's got kind of a status. We convert that into something that can be used in this integration flow, and then based off of that, we route it to our different receivers. And then for maybe one of those receivers has a specific mapping they need to have. So that's the next step in the iFlow. And then these lines that you see here, these bold black lines that I'm pointing out, those are communication channels. And so those communication channels are essentially saying, this is a REST API that's coming in, and this one here is going to an XI system, and this one here is a SOAP interface, and this one here is an IDOC. So we're able to spread that out among multiple systems, and perhaps there's routing in between, right? We can say, you know, only send it if this is true. If it's a critical status, then send it to everybody. But if it's only a warning status, then send it to one person. That kind of logic can be encoded in this. This is all represented in BPMN. This is a modeling notation that is used in many different business process tools. You can actually export this and import it into another tool, and it will be able to parse it and understand what you're trying to say. It may not know the technical references behind the scenes, but it'll at least be able to show you the model for it. And then within these, we're using Apache Camel, which is a kind of a representational format of this modeling. Okay. Mappings. So the mapping editor is it's very drag and drop. You can pull from one structure to another. So for instance, this is an example of a purchase order to an EDI format. What I can see here, and hopefully that you can see this, this is a European or a Euro transactional currency code. So I'm able to drag this currency code over to the currency code for EDI in the correct node there, and then that is mapped. I can also put functions in between that maybe I have a date that's formatted this way, where it's year, month, day, which is many times how you might get it out of SAP. But on the receiving side, the expectation is it's in a UTC format. So we have a function to convert that into a UTC. Many of those functions exist. There's a multitude to list there, but that's one example that you would find in this type of scenario. And so you're not only able to see what is the structure, and you're able to actually put data in here and see it show up on this side and test it, and then see where all those connections are, or where a connection is not made. Next tool is monitoring. There are many ways to monitor an integration. One of them is within Cloud Platform itself. And so this is what the monitoring looks like within Cloud Platform. You're able to monitor based off of integration flows. Here we see that we've had 3 integration flows run in the past hour, and all 3 messages were successful. So there's no failed or error or retry messages that we need to go look at. So everything's green, we're good to go. We have integration content. So let's say that we have some content that whenever we trigger the integration, an error happens. So that's raised here. We're able to see that there's an error. I can go look at that. And then finally is security. I'll talk a little bit more about security later, but this is a place where we can see the different artifacts that you would get from an integration scenario. One of those might be I'm integrating using a key store, or I'm using where a key store could have user ID and password. It could have a certificate that is used within the integration, or a token that's passed on. All of that could be within this security area here. All right, next one here is the data services setup. So it varies slightly, where you have to have one extra piece of software that's installed on premise. And this is very specific for the CPI DS scenario. And what this is trying to represent here is you need to have a data services agent that is able to parse files, have a file handler that's on premise, or a database connection that's on premise. They were able to do the interactions with that here. And so this is a SAP diagram showing that data service agent has to be there. It's quite a bit different than just a web technology where I have a REST service, or I have a SOAP interface that's all over HTTP or a method like that. It's all within this. So the data services agent is something on premise to create files or to consume files, and the same with databases. So again, this is for the data type of integrations as opposed to real time. Security and governance. So one of the questions I have is when I'm doing cloud platform integration, how do I get stuff from one environment to another? there are many ways you can do this within Cloud Platform. You can use CTS Plus, you can use TMS, import export, you can use MTAR, or you can even integrate with Charm. So all of the standard SAPs that you have come to know and love, they're all able to do that. So all of that process is completely possible there. I recommend CTS Plus at least. That is one of the easier ones to do. So that allows you to get everything within your change process to what you're comfortable with, and you're able to continue your same processes to move that content. The others, the import export, that really relies on developers or administrators to export a file, log out of one system, log into another, import a file. And it's not a problem to do that. I've seen customers today that they've had PI for years and years, and that's the way they do it. There's not really a problem with that, as long as that's a trusted individual and you're able to see that. If you're more of a company that has lots of compliance, I recommend using something like Charm. So with Charm, you're able to move everything at once. You're able to make sure that it went into place. You're able to see who are the names that are associated with it. That kind of heavy-duty compliance, Charm is a good fit for. And this CTS component fits within Charm. Another thing that I have had customers approach me about is, what about documentation? How do you document an interface? And I've seen varying degrees of documentation. But as a person, if I were to come in and look at documentation, the main things I would be looking for is general functionality. I've seen documentation has very specific mapping details there. The tool can generate that information. So if you want it in there, that's great. Just use the tool to do it. I've seen very complex Excel spreadsheets that show everything, and but the tool generates it for you. So that I don't, use the tools to work for you, and don't work so hard at it. The other thing that's really important here is the way to identify the integration. So if you're talking about specific objects, you need to know the interface name, what is the technical name. Maybe you have a document naming standard. Associate those two so that it's easy to figure out what is the document that is associated with the interface. Who are the senders and receivers involved? What is the volume or the space that it's going to take up, or anything that you see as relevant to that. And then the last thing I think that's really important is to have test data encapsulated in the documentation, because if you don't have test data, it's very easy to make mistakes if you don't have different scenarios to test through. So if you make a change and you only have 3 out of the 4 scenarios documented, but the 4th scenario breaks it, you will find out in production. So it's best to have that test data encapsulated there somehow. So that would be my recommendation for documentation. Lastly, everyone's favorite subject, security and governance. So there are different levels of encryption here. We have SSL and TLS. HTTPS is supported, but HTTP2 is not yet supported. TLS 1.2 is supported, but not 1.3. So these are some of the features that in my interactions with security groups that kind of gives them pause, as these types of standards are not yet supported. I'm assuming they will be very soon. SAP is very good about adopting standards, so that's coming. Message payload encryption. So I talked about this a little bit earlier, but there's a way to encrypt messages. So if somehow your message were to be intercepted at the transport layer and your message was received and it's encrypted, it's still very difficult to crack that encryption because it needs a key or a certificate to prove who you are and what you're allowed to do. So we're able to encrypt, decrypt, sign, and verify. All of those features are available using either PKCS7 or BGP. Those standards are good enough for a simple message encryption. Secure data stores for keys and passwords. I showed you that earlier. So that's essentially the place where all that is there. So you're not having to worry about user IDs and passwords being visible. Perhaps you don't want the developer to see it, so you're able to import that to the store, and you just tell the developer, this is the store where those things are, and everyone is covered. All right, the last thing, the new features. So this is the thing that I find to be the most important feature of the new features that are being released, and that's Integration Advisor. Basically what that is it makes suggestions using machine learning based on the type of mapping that you're doing. So with the graphic you see there, it's the same graphic you saw earlier with the purchase order. But what you may not see is down here at the bottom, it has confidence levels of this field here, which is a transaction currency, maps to this EDI field here called currency code. And it uses a machine learning model to do that. How does it do that? It does it based off of what is the message type, or what is the field name, what is the data type, what is the community knowledge, how have we done it in the past. All of that has been taken into consideration for this machine learning message mapping. So, you know, this is obviously a canned model, but the confidence level is 99% for this one. So there are likely to be scenarios where if you're receiving a purchase order from a system that it's been integrated with before, and it's part of the machine learning model, that it will be able to turn your 3-month integration project into maybe a couple of weeks. So I find this is one of the newest features that to be most excited about. All right, so at this time we're going to have a Q&A. I'm going to hand it back to Amy.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. That was a great presentation. So in fact, we did get a couple of questions for you. The first one is, I'm unable to see integration as one of the services in my cloud cockpit. How do I access CPI?
That's a good question. So in one of the slides that I had earlier, you may not have seen that CPI is not given through the standard way you see services. SAP has to provision those tenants for you. In general, they will give you a development / test environment, and they will also give you a production environment. So they don't necessarily give you that 3-tier environment. I have had customers who are in process of negotiating those 3 environments with their customers, but that's generally how we do that.
Great. Next question. Would you recommend replacing SAP process orientation with cloud processing orientation? Or CPI? Excuse me.
Process orchestration with CPI. Okay. So that's a good question. I think there are 2 different differences to be distinguished here. So process orchestration or PI is a tool that is on premise. This is a cloud tool. So if you have licensing in such a way where it doesn't matter how much data is flowing through your CPI instance, or if it's not very much, then yeah, it's probably worth replacing it. But if you have a very heavily used PI system on premise, then I think you're going to need to do a cost benefit analysis. How much power does this thing take up? How critical is the uptime for it? How many resources do we have that have to monitor this thing all the time? And then weigh that with what is the cost to put it into cloud platform integration, because within cloud platform integration there is a cost based off of how many connections you make, and also what is the volume of data that's running through it. So those are usually the licensing models you see. So I would say it depends, which is the typical consulting answer, but it really does depend. I wouldn't say that I would walk into a room and say I have a strategy to get rid of on-premise PO or PI with CPI, but it is possible.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Next one is how are cloud workflows implemented in CPI?
Yeah, so cloud workflows are a different product in general, but there are APIs within the cloud workflow where within my integration, I can just call that workflow from the iFlow. So I have the format that the workflow is expecting. I call it through the API. I post to it. It will kick off the workflow, and then it will give me a response. So it's not quite the same as it used to be in the PI days or the XI days, where you had modeling that you did that was just part of the integration, and then you kind of connected the dot to it. This is kind of more, you need to know the API URL to call it, and you'll be able to integrate it with it that way. Good question.
That's great. And we did get one last question in relationship to the recording and the slides, and we will be making those available after the session. Actually, I'm going to hand it back to you, Andy, to put up the last slide. I think it has our contact information on it.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for coming today. I encourage you to visit our YouTube channel, which has the link there down at the bottom. It's basically just bit.ly/mindsetytc. This has a lot of our webinars there. This one will also be published there. And then reach out to me on your email address there that I have. I'm just Andy at Mindset Consulting, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
And actually, do you, Andy, there is one last question. Do you have context in handling CPI?
Context handling in CPI. Yes, there is context handling in CPI. It was part of one of the features that I had mentioned in one of my earlier slides. Yep, it's there.
Okay, so we can follow up with the person who asked that one. So.
Sure.
Perfect. I'm going to just, I think we're at the top of the hour, so we're just going to, as much as interest as there is, I think we have to wind up. So thank you very, very much. Again, if anybody has any questions or in getting the webinar, we will make those available. But if you have any other questions, our email addresses are right in front of you. If you want to schedule time with Andy to talk about any projects you have in mind, please let us know. We're always happy to talk to anybody about SAP Cloud. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.